Hello, and welcome to another Living Systems Collaboratory Spotlight. The Living Systems Collaboratory is a part of the Design Science Studio, and today we will be spotlighting artist and designer Stephen Bao. The Design Science Studio, just for a little context, is a wonderful educational incubator for art that has been working to empower creators to imagine a regenerative future. And Stephen Bao is part of the first cohort of 144 revolutionaries and was also a part of another program called the Living Systems Art and Design Collaboratory, which was also powered by the Design Science Studio as one of our programs in partnership with the Emergent Media DesignLab at the University of California, Irvine, and sponsored through the generous patronage and mentorship of systems philosopher Mansoor Vakili. This program provided funding and mentorship and additional education for artists and designers who were focused on the development of creative projects that explore living systems. And so today we will hear from Stephen Bao. And Stephen Bao, as I mentioned, is a designer, but also I want to just give you a little bit more of a background, which I'm sure you'll hear all about also from Stephen. But what I will say is that he has been an incredibly important part of the cohort and has been exploring beyond the edges of this cohort in his life and in his work, how we imagine, design, and build the future together. He founded the Builders Collective, which has been creating a space to build leaders to design a resilient society. And he writes about the evolution of design at stephenbao.com and works as a mentor for the UX Academy at DesignLab. So today we will hear from Stephen, and then we'll have a wonderful conversation about living systems. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Roxy. It's an immense pleasure and privilege to be here. And yeah, I've just been so amazed by the whole experience of being part of the Design Science Studio and the Living Systems Collaboratory. And I feel like I've learned so much, and it's an ongoing learning process. And I just want to take people through just a little bit of the experience that I've been through, just by starting with this presentation that I've created for just kind of summarizing my experience with the Living Systems Art and Design Collaboratory. So I call myself a social architect, and that is not because I'm a social theorist or in any way an architect. It's because I'm recognizing that the role of design is changing, and we find ourselves building social systems. So I'm living into an identity that I think is evolving over time. And what we're discovering is that we have this opportunity now to think of who we are. And as I'm thinking about the Builders Collective, this is a name that I've drawn from the inspiration of the Bauhaus. What was the Bauhaus doing? Bau means to build in German. And my last name is Chinese. But I'm combining these disparate identities into a new identity that I'm forming, thinking about how do we gain the agency, the influence, the capacity to reimagine our social architecture. And so in this process, I've been thinking about how to build a brand. This is a short URL that I was able to find, builders.co. So building leaders to design a resilient society was the phrase that I brought out of this kind of acronym that I found. And it's about reimagining, going through this design process to imagine, design, and build the future together. So it's finding that creativity and innovation at the intersection of art and science to imagine a new way of being. It's about being influenced by the past, but also shaping the future through design. And it's about building resilience, relationships, and community through building new forms of design and architecture. So just by creating a little bit of psychological priming, using the word 3, it leads into ideas that I've been exploring about how I've been going back into the sacred texts that I was raised in a very Christian evangelical culture. So all this media was being pushed at us in my Canadian context from the American media environment, and I was trying to reframe as I was trying to understand the sacred text and how it relates to modern life. I was recognizing that myself as a designer, I was seeing different patterns than what others seem to be noticing or experiencing. So as I was looking through the Genesis story about the creation of the earth and the world, I was noticing there was a pattern that related to this 3 days or the series of three, and how that evoked a kind of design iteration. And so when I look at the first 3 days of the Genesis narrative, there's a separation between light and dark, between water and sky in the second day, and then between land and sea on the third day. And what I noticed out of that was the creation of a new form of life, vegetative life. And as we move through the story, there's a second iteration of light, water, and land. So the separation of day and night, the filling of the domains of water and sky with the birds and fish, and on the third day of that iteration, the filling of the land with animals and human beings. And here we arrive at sentient life. So as we move again through the story, there's another iteration of that design pattern. And then we get into new forms of life that are forming. So I'm seeing that there's a growing in complexity in the living systems of the planet. So we're going through this nation building exercise where there's light as a means of drawing people out of slavery and injustice to a new way of thinking of being human, where we create our own social systems, and it's drawing us out of or through the waters of violence and corruption to a land of well, in the story Milk and Honey, it was meant to be the promised land, but what they recognized over time was institutions were built and they started replicating the old models of empire, and it ultimately led to exile and homelessness. And now, as we're moving further outside of the sacred text to re-embody these ideas in over the last couple thousand years, we find that we're following the same patterns again, but it's about wealth and power and how people got into boats and started thinking, well, there's lots of promised lands all over the place. Let's figure out how we can reap the benefits of the so-called New World. And what it led to was this rape and genocide of the earth. And now we find ourselves in this time of theft, land theft, and extraction. And so over this time, we're recognizing that we keep on making mistakes as human beings as we're trying to figure out, what does all this mean? And at the beginning of the 20th century, they found themselves in the midst of biological, personal, social, economic, political, and ecological crises, multiple systemic crises from the micro to the macro. And to get out of that situation, they explored ways of, in the Weimar Republic, where in Germany, They had lost the war, the aristocracy had crumbled, and there was a pandemic, and there was financial collapse, so many multiple systemic crises happening all at once. They brought together architects and artists from around the world to form the Bauhaus. But what happened as a result of that over 100 years is that we've used modern forms of industrial design and architecture to build the modern world, but we're having second thoughts about what we've just created, especially in the midst of, again, multiple systemic crises from the micro to the macro. So here we are in a pandemic. We're facing a crisis of mental health, personal crises, social breakdown, economic collapse, political polarization, and a worldwide ecological crisis. So here I am reframing, using these same ideas. How do we think about light, water, and land in different ways, maybe being even a little bit more faithful to the meaning or understandings of that sacred text that I was raised on? What if light meant a kind of metaphysical enlightenment and understanding, and we're going through this spiritual emergence and transformation that is ultimately going to realize the healing and regeneration of the land? And so what I'm recognizing is, as a designer who's been working for 30 years, we are moving from this physical artifact where the design process is about building the physical, maybe even the digital infrastructure of our modern world. But we're also now moving towards recognizing that the things that we are designing are impacting living systems. And that changes the way we need to think about our responsibility as designers. So as I was thinking of this in terms of the Living Systems Collaboratory, we're exploring how we create change by transcending the helplessness of the individual, by embracing the power of the collective, a creative, collaborative, self-organizing learning community. And through this, we're exploring what is metaphysical gravity? How can we explore what Buckminster Fuller was imagining as the thing or the force that was holding everything together in the universe? Metaphysical gravity. If there's a physical gravity, is there a metaphysical corollary to that? So my proposition for the Living Systems Collaboratory was to figure out, how do we create a navigation system for spaceship Earth? And it helped me to think in terms of nested systems, and how we can think maybe in terms of our media ecology, and how that's developed over the last 2,000 years, where we started with Christianity and empire, then we moved to colonialism and capitalism, climate change, and now we're in this moment of the coronavirus. And this has all been driven by all these different systems and technologies that we've created over time to create a modern media information system. But we're thinking more in terms of the design science decade as part of the design science studio. There's a process that we're leaning into over the next 10 years. And how do we think more holistically about how all these systems connect in terms of nested systems, from the biological to the personal to the social to the economic, political, and ecological? Well, then we can also think of ourselves as the physical, a self within a group, within a community, within a society, in Earth, in the universe, and what is beyond that in the metaphysical. So it takes us down to the molecular level, where we can see how we're growing into cells out of that molecular biology. But we're also recognizing that we're part of a holobiont. And what that means is that we, taking the kind of overview effect that we have from astronauts looking at the Earth from space, there's a recognition that the Earth seems to look like an organism, as if we're looking through a microscope at a living cell. But if we think of it as part of the living universe as well, we can think of the galaxies and the stars as providing all the raw materials that made life possible. And what Buckminster Fuller was talking about in terms of, there seems to be this entropy, but he coined a term called syntropy, where he was recognizing that there's more happening in the universe that is adding to the universe rather than simply only taking away energy. And so we have this growing awareness of the connections between entropy and syntropy as kind of a cycle that's making life possible. And as we explore the ideas of polarity, entropy, and syntropy, well, as we apply that to within the design world, as we're thinking of ourselves as, the students that I'm training are being trained in the field of user experience design, and we're using mental models like how do we use personas to empathize with the people that we're trying to serve through design. But I found that artifact didn't really fully encompass the full breadth of human experience, and I wanted to create a different model that explored what is a holistic way of thinking about human experience that can encompass the core essence of what it means to be human in this reality, and then how our internal cognition, emotion, action, and our perceptions are all being combined to create this human experience that we are part of, as we are looking at ourselves as a holobiont, a set of nested systems that are interdependent within the living systems of the planet. And as we think about how our human experience is affecting other individuals within that realm, and also impacting the wider ecological systems that we find ourselves in, we see that there's patterns in the way we have inputs going into the systems that we are made up of. And if we drive those experiences in a certain direction towards maybe thinking in terms of our interior vision, will, and effort being a way of creating our own influence, agency, and capacity within the wider environment, what we are discovering is that we have the ability to imagine, design, and build a different future together. But this is in the realm of thinking in terms of collaboration. So here we are in all of these nested systems from reality, time, awareness, values, senses, inputs, behavior, work, disciplines, science, design, artifacts, phases, and actions. There's a lot of complexity that is going on within these nested systems that impact our environment. And what I was imagining was, what if there was a way of creating a different kind of social media that was not about a colonized social architecture that was trying to figure out how do we manipulate human behavior so that we can maximize profit? What if it became something that came from the inside out, where human beings were given the tools to be able to create a better life, understand how they could be better human beings, and out of that grows the living social architecture that more closely aligns with the harmony of the living systems that we are a part of. And it means understanding ourselves as a holobiont from the physical all the way to the metaphysical, and exploring all these nested systems, maybe in terms of a different kind of economics, like donut economics, as Kate Rayworth has been proposing, or even thinking of ourselves in terms of our ecological dynamics within an evolving culture, and how we inherited this kind of top-down hierarchical way of being in the world. But if we look back to indigenous ways of being, rather than, the way the corporate world is just a mirror image of the colonization that we've been through over at least the past 500 years, but even the last 2000. What if we thought of ourselves in terms of indigenous ways of being, as nested systems of spiritual, individual, familial, communal, global, universal ways of understanding our place in the universe? And this comes back then to, what is metaphysical gravity? Well, according to Buckminster Fuller, love is metaphysical gravity. And this is kind of the unifying force that helps us to think of ourselves as one new humanity, and creating a new story of love overcoming the power of empire, and reimagining social architecture as, what is the environment we need to manifest our collective intelligence, to understand ourselves as part of this social architecture where we can gain personal resilience, develop social influence, economic capacity, political agency, and ecological harmony, through thinking about what is designed for resilience. When we know when things can go wrong, how would we learn from our mistakes and think of life more holistically? So I'm probably way over time, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But this is where you can find me, and I'd love to carry on this conversation about how we can be part of this living systems collaboratory that I think we are as a human species.
Oh, Stephen, what an incredible synthesis. It has been amazing to experience your design synthesis in and through these nested systems. And I just want to appreciate you for obviously taking so much careful time and thought to integrate and test how this framework helps to be a bridge across all of these different perceived ways and concrete ways of navigating this world. We've barely scratched the surface in this conversation, and I know that we are out of time, so we don't get to have a deeper conversation. But yeah. I will just acknowledge what an incredible sharing of your art this has been today, and I think that every single one of these pieces of art, one of these slides that you shared of your design, is just a vehicle for so much inquiry. And so I'm curious, you said that people can reach out to you and get in touch with you. And what is it that you're calling in specifically around collaboration, as we are here in the Living Systems Collaboratory, and as one of the core nodes of these solutions moving forward for you?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think that the answer to that question is evolving as I'm living through kind of the changes that are happening even within my own life. My father-in-law just died of COVID, and so we're going through a kind of capital transfer. And to me, that's kind of thinking of ourselves. When I was thinking of the Builders Collective, that was like 5-6 years ago. Just me thinking about how do we think of ourselves as a kind of new Bauhaus that are been given this opportunity to reimagine our social architecture. Well, I think that's what we're doing as the Design Science Studio and the Living Systems Collaboratory, and I'm really just recognizing, documenting into existence the kind of things that are already happening. And I think what I'm asking for probably is more, if anyone has stories about where there are projects of regeneration of our living systems, then I want to have the ability to walk into that and document it and make it more of a reality by creating greater awareness of for people of what's already happening. So I'm just diving into lots of different spaces to just sort of tap into just the surface level. I want to understand what's going on, but I can't on my own take it all in. And I think it would be amazing to have more people on board and thinking about how do we create new media? Are they podcasts? Are they, having conversations on Clubhouse? And so I'm open to all of these ideas about how we manifest our collective intelligence by actually figuring out how we collaborate together, especially even if it's part of the Buckminster Fuller Institute's initiative to be part of how do we create this cooperating manual for Spaceship Earth. So there's so many projects that we're part of right now. It's just a challenge just to document it all as it's happening.
Beautiful. Well, may this be a honing beacon for these projects and more so that you can help amplify them. Yep. Thank you for your commitment to this work, Stephen. I'm so grateful that this has brought us together, and it is only the beginning of the decade. So looking forward to seeing all the beautiful ripples that are created through all the collaborations that you touch and our collaborations and beyond. Thank you for taking the time today. It's been such an honor to be in the collaboratory with you, and more to come.
Yes, I'm so grateful to you, Roxy, for just giving us this opportunity. And you were so amazing at being that kind of conductor of all of this energy and empowering us to kind of take chances and try different things that we'd never tried before. And I think that's part of what it means to be a Living Systems Collaboratory is figuring out how do we gain that influence, capacity, and agency together.
And that was always the point, to build the capacity of the creative community as a core and integral part of this regenerative movement. So I'm so glad that that's Beautiful. Working, and together we're doing even more of that. So yay! Yeah. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you,
we will close the stream and hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day, and see you soon. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.